unmute. Starting in at 14 seconds. Let's see, I can unmute Becky. All right, we are on. Wow, that's cool. I like that. All right, welcome everybody. And this is the Content Marketing Virtual Summit, the live stream Q&A. And this is Jason, one of the co-hosts of the summit, and I'm here with Becky. You should say your last name because it's a Hewson-Haworth, right?
Hewson-Haworth. Yeah, I spend my life spelling this.
Hewson-Haworth. There you go. So I think to start out the live stream here, the first thing I'm just going to say is welcome everyone. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are, a great night, and that you're enjoying the summit. So what we're going to do is start off by having Becky introduce a little bit about herself, and then we'll dive into some of the questions. But yeah, it'd be great just for you to say hi and introduce yourself and what your focus is.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming along. Becky Hewson-Haworth. I specialise in employee reward communications. So I have a bit of an unusual background. So I did about 10, 12 years in human resources, specialising in employee reward, which is very spreadsheet, database analytical, setting up bonus schemes, running bonus schemes, doing compensation, pay reviews, market data, lots of analytics, but also lots of comms in there as well. And after about 10, 12 years of that, I'd had enough, packed it in and changed over to copywriting. And then I realised that everything I had learned about copywriting and marketing, if I'd have known that when I was doing my reward roles, just how valuable that would have been. So I ended up specialising, things have taken off since I've done that. So it's been good.
Awesome. So really, it's an interesting history and background to be somebody who really works in HR, who actually does the job of HR, and does all of the various different things, and then now is actually working to make a lot of HR departments more effective. And so I think that's just awesome. So I think we have people who've submitted questions throughout the week and ahead of time. We've had 12,000 people register for the event. We've had about 15,000 people attend the event so far, come and view different talks. And so we, just been a really good response overall, amazing speakers. And I think that's thanks to all the speakers. So really appreciate them. So the first thing I think that is really, I'm going to look through the questions here and just see which one would be a good one to start with. So I think one of the questions, I think we don't have to necessarily go in perfect order, but let's try this one here. Let's say the first question is going to be this one. So the question is, how did you get started in this type of content marketing?
It was funny because when I finished my HR career, I was like, that's it, that's behind me, that's the past. I'd never want anything to do with that again. Not because I didn't find it interesting. I think I just had enough of doing it. But I'd had enough of doing the actual management and implementation of schemes. After a couple of years, what I realised was that actually I really found the topic very interesting. I know a lot about it. And it just seemed really silly to not put together the new knowledge and experience I had with my old knowledge and experience, partly because it's something that, potentially you can charge more for because it's quite a niche specialist area of knowledge, and partly because it is something that I find interesting and I am actually still passionate about it. So having said that, I don't want anything to do with HR, sort of 2 years later, I was like, actually, I could kind of go back there again. So that's kind of how I ended up getting back into it. And then I was quite lucky with, I just sort of changed my LinkedIn profile, did a little bit of LinkedIn training, changed my LinkedIn profile, just put it out there that this is what I was going to specialize in now, and picked up some really good clients. So I do some work for, I did a day's consultancy with Coca-Cola, which was amazing. And then I have ended up working through some other agencies as well, working for them for some of their clients who are huge global businesses. So it just kind of, just from a tweak to my LinkedIn profile and what I was talking about, all just kind of took off.
Wow, that's really interesting. So this is kind of related to the last question. which is people are one of the audience members was asking and wondering, it looks like you're focusing on something very specific. So they would be afraid. I'm reading between the lines here. So can focusing on something so specific like employee reward content marketing actually pay well?
Yeah. So the funny thing was, at the start of my copywriting career change, I read a lot about should you be a generalist or should you have a niche and specialize, and I just didn't know which way to go. And I thought, oh, if I go specialist, I won't get enough work. I was really worried that I just wouldn't, survive. So I went generalist initially, and then specialized 2 years later. In the year that I specialized, I doubled my turnover within 9 months of that year. So it pays. So I found that I was still getting the original work. I was getting in the generalist sort of copywriting work, but then I was also getting in the specialist work, and people found me and they knew that they wanted me. So because I was advertising myself in a specific way, the conversations with clients became very, just quite easy, because they could see my background, they could see what I could provide. And then, there wasn't really, oh, well, we're talking to other people. There were no other people to talk to. So it was quite easy to land the work. So I ended up with the normal level of work that I had, plus all of this extra work on top. And yes, you can charge higher rates for it because it's a specialism. So it's a bit like tech copywriting that charges, you can charge additional money for that. Same sort of thing. I call it technical copywriting because it is technical.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite an interesting, thought process. And I really think that having tried to go generalist first and then go and feel nervous to specialize and then go into the specialty field is something a lot of people struggle with, because the general tendency is to try to do everything and think that you're going to get more clients that way. So here's another sort of not specifically related one, but kind of related. So we can take a look at this question here. So the question is, in your projects, who is the main contact for the content?
So it's going to be an HR director or a reward director, probably. It depends on the size of the business and whether they've got internal communications or marketing. So if they have internal communications and marketing, it could be them. If they don't, it will be direct with HR. But if it's a smaller business, and some of my clients are smaller businesses, I work with massive ones regularly, but sometimes smaller businesses need something specific. And then you could be dealing with one of the leadership team. So yeah, it's a mixed bag.
Well, that's interesting. So sometimes you're dealing with HR, sometimes you're dealing with internal communications, sometimes you're actually dealing with the co-founder or the CEO. Yep. That's a pretty interesting, I wasn't expecting that kind of variety. That's pretty interesting.
It makes your posts on social media tough, because you're like, oh, which audience am I writing for today? But I guess you won't run out of content, because if you've got 5 different audiences to target with the same message, you're saying 5 different things in 5 different ways, or the same thing in 5 different ways. But yeah.
That's pretty interesting, actually. So here's another question that I think is a little bit deeper into the workflow. So does this type of content go through an approval process? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, so actually really similar to marketing work. So I would always have the proposal, the kind of the brief, the outline. The difference with this is that these clients aren't used to briefing quite often. So you have to really take the lead on the briefing process and be really clear with your questions, do the thinking for them. So you get that really clear brief. Once that's approved, do the first draft, get the first draft across. And one project I'm working on at the moment, we've had quite a lot of feedback. And that's fine. That's all part of the process. Some things will go through 2 rounds of feedback, dead easy, 1 in a Word document, 1 in the design document, job done. This one has been, this is partly maybe shouldn't be saying this, partly my fault for not getting the brief spot on to start with, but hey, we all learn. And then we've had to go backwards and forwards a few times. And then the other thing that you might find is in big organizations, you'll have the person doing the project who'll do the first round or couple of rounds of approvals. Then it will go to their bosses, and there'll be multiple people at that level of sign off. So the best thing to do is to get them to pull all of their feedback together into one document. and then get all of those changes made in one go. So yeah, there can be, it's very similar to marketing sign-off, but sometimes you can end up with more, particularly if it's a new project for the business, particularly if it's very technical, or just something they haven't really thought about before, because they don't really know sometimes exactly what it is that they're looking for. So until you actually write the copy, and they see it in the design sometimes as well, it can be quite difficult for them to say, oh, is this really what we wanted? So yeah, it's a very similar approval process, but maybe with a little bit more approval.
Yeah, I can imagine that because it's HR related, they don't want to make mistakes or make promises that, people get the wrong expectation, and then they have to go back and say, no, we can't do that for you. So depending on, because you're writing about some things like retirement benefits or insurance benefits or holiday benefits or education benefits. So I think, and correct me if I'm saying something wrong, but, and so for those reasons, it's really important to be very quality control oriented in your process. And so I think that's quite interesting, that you have that extra layer of care and quality control. I mean, it is more than, for example, just writing an article. An article should be always correct, 100% correct. But when you're talking about somebody is setting an expectation for their retirement or their holidays based on what's written, in an HR rewards content, it really needs to be right. It really can't have mistakes in there. So it's a pretty interesting process to do quality control. I think that's something that we could dive into, maybe again later in this Q&A or at another time. Here's another question that's coming up. So in terms of the kind of the life cycle of the project, for other types of content marketing, some of them are really fast. Like we have an event coming up and we just need stuff done within a few weeks or something like that. So for employee reward types of content marketing, is the life cycle usually minimum 3 months, or is it minimum 6 months? Do you have something like that, or how does that look like?
Huge variation. So you could just have a one-off project, which is help, I need to get my gender pay gap report written, and it's 2 weeks. So this is similar to kind of a marketing project. If you're doing something longer term, so it could be looking at establishing a strategy, a communication strategy, getting plans in place. Maybe those would be quarterly plans, and then delivering content across the year. There can be that kind of project as well. So it varies, but yeah, usually a year I would say would be the longest. I've never worked on anything that's a year, but that's potential. Quite often it gets chunked down to quarters, because that's how the business will operate in quarters. And also things can change very quickly with business. New benefits are coming in, reward can change, the approach to reward can change. So quite often, yeah, quarterly chunks is quite a good way of working.
Wow, that's interesting. I would have actually thought they would be much longer terms, because the cycle of there's so many different types of content that need to be written. You could have quite a lot of details in each one, and there's the review process and the rewrite. So that's very interesting to me. So you move pretty fast. You're pretty responsive. You get in there. You can do things as fast as a couple weeks, quarterly. I mean, that's awesome. That's really.
Yeah, it can sometimes be that there are wider projects going on, and they literally just want you to come in and just do this one thing. It's like, we need all of our incentive plans communicated, or there's been a change in the business, and we're harmonizing terms and conditions. So come in and just focus on that one part of the project. Again, it depends what the setup is. If they've got their internal communications team, they will typically do that kind of longer term stuff, and then you'll come in and just bring that sort of specialist input to the project. Yeah, it's mixed bag.
Pretty interesting. Okay, here's another one. How often or do you write newsletters for HR departments versus
never?
Never?
No, I've never done this. So yeah, it's never. I don't even offer it as a service, to be honest. So that maybe that's why.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting question, I think, because the thing about companies is that they could update their employees about like some things that are going on in terms of the strategic vision or the direction or some big wins that the company's had. And so it's not directly related to, say, for example, rewards, but it is quite something that could improve, letting the employees know that, they're moving in a certain direction. And maybe that's more of an internal communications and less of an HR rewards thing. That
tends to be. So one business I'm doing some work with at the moment, they do regular weekly newsletters. They actually come direct from the CEO. So obviously I'm pretty sure they will go through internal comms and they'll get tweaked or whatever, or ghostwritten for him. But that's internal comms, and I would sort of do the more technical kind of communication.
Interesting. Okay, so here's another question. Does this type of communication, employee reward communication, do you think, Becky, that it can have an impact and help companies improve retention?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a hard one quite often one of my frustrations, and this is with content marketing and internal comms, is the sort of lack of measurement. So I really like to be really clear at the start. Okay, what is it that we want to deliver? Where are we now? Where do we want to get to? And to sort of set those KPIs. And I quite often went back to one client about 3 times and said, how did we get on after the project, after you rolled it all out? Did you check the stats, the KPIs we set up at the start? How did it go? And I just didn't get anything back. So it's probably one of my biggest frustrations, because I want to be able to prove that this works. We know that it does work. It has to work. So basically what you're doing is telling people, here's your reward package. This is what's in it for you. It will increase retention. No, I have no doubt about it. I just can't prove it right now. Very frustrating.
Yeah, I'm just, it's interesting. I would think like as a point of that would be maybe integrating some kind of pop-up survey or something. So when they're reading it or accessing it, that there'd be at least some pop-up survey, but that would require a lot of participation on the employer's part, because you wouldn't necessarily have control over that. But possibly include that in a proposal maybe, and just be, we can do this survey while we do this content. Here's another question that I think is kind of the other end of that, which is, do you think, Becky, that this type of employee rewards communication could help in any way to help with the hiring of people?
Yeah, so this is much easier to measure. So so I did work with, this was a fairly small local business. They were an accountancy firm, and they were really struggling to recruit people. So they were putting the job adverts out, and they would the only people that applied were people from overseas who weren't qualified, and also because they weren't qualified, they wouldn't have met the criteria to come into the country as an immigrant. So they were having real challenges, just weren't getting the people that they wanted. They wanted somebody who lived down the road, basically, who had the same, UK recognized qualifications. So we pulled together a recruitment pack, and that went out, and immediately the responses that they got were the right kind of people. So it's so easy to see there that, from not getting anybody who was suitable at all to getting completely suitable candidates, that's a really easy one to measure. So yes, definitely supports the hiring process. And there's a lot that you can do around that. There's like all sorts of different things that you can do, from recruitment packs to even like things that people think of as something for employees only. So total reward statements. And like a big statement which pulls together your whole reward package. It shows you what percentages, pay, benefits, pension, etc. And you can see that. But actually you can use that to help recruit people as well, because you can show them the value of the whole package. So it's just about thinking about different types of communication in slightly different ways.
I think this is an important thing, that for the companies that are considering working with someone like yourself on that side, which is that if you're not a huge company, if you're even a medium-sized company, but you're not one of the biggest top 30 companies in the UK or globally, a lot of times when people are considering working for you, they may have an assumption that your rewards package is not going to be as good as. So if you have this huge mega global corporation, people might just assume, the rewards package, the benefits package is going to be fantastic. But like some medium-sized and smaller companies have many wonderful things in their rewards package, but they don't necessarily share that with potential employees early enough, so that the potential employee might just discount them and say, I'm not going to come and even proceed to this company because they have an assumption that the rewards package isn't as good. So I think that's fascinating, because you could really highlight that this company has a top-notch rewards program. And I think for prospective employees, that takes a lot of the fear of working for a smaller firm or a middle-sized firm out of the equation, and gives them a sense of certainty and confidence. So I think that's really very, very interesting. Sorry,
it's interesting with smaller companies as well, is that the reward package will have lots of different elements to it. It may or may not be super competitive, but they actually quite often offer other things. So it could be the culture, it could be the fact that somebody only has to go 20 minutes down the road to get to work, whereas big corporations tend to be city centre based, and you're having to battle through the traffic to get in for your however many days a week we're going to be back in the office now. So it's about really understanding the whole offering that they have beyond the reward.
I think it's a very interesting question. So let's see here. There's a question that I think is, I think that could be. There's one that I saw earlier. Let me see if it's still here. Question here. Well, I'm going to go to this one, since this one is. Let's do this one. Do you ever help to write employee handbooks? That's just a question.
I do. Yeah. I've just done 3 of these actually for a company. So they've done their UK one, but they've gone global, or in lots of different countries, maybe not global. And they had one for 3 different countries that all needed looking at. So they've been tweaked and messed around with by the lawyers, putting on all of the different relevant legal wording that you have to have, and then they wanted them all pulled back in line with the UK one in terms of the phrasing, taking it away from legalese into plain English, just making it something that's readable, that people can engage with, that they can actually understand. So I've done quite a lot of work around those, more sort of from that editing perspective rather than starting from scratch. But I've done quite a few of those, especially recently. That's been quite a focus.
That's an interesting one, because I would assume that it's a very different type of writing when you're writing a handbook or editing a handbook, And I think that's an interesting one too, because you work across different HR departments. So you can probably come in and just say, your handbook really isn't very well, it's not very easy to understand or navigate or something like that. So just having you take a look at it, and that's interesting. That's like one of the powers of specializing, I think, is that you're able to bring that experience and speed up the process, and maybe help them feel more confident as well. Like our employee handbook has the basis done. That's really a good one. I'll bet you there's a lot of companies out there that don't even have an employee handbook. So that would be interesting to look at.
Yeah, and there's a quite big movement in HR at the moment to sort of get away from this old-fashioned, stilted, sort of legal type language, to make it just something that employees can actually just read and understand quickly. It's just effective, and it actually cuts down the number of questions that HR get. So it's really beneficial on a number of fronts.
I think that's very interesting. So we had this one already. So let's see here. This is a new one here. So who are the main readers of employee rewards content? Like, who's consuming this?
So it's a mixed bag. It will be managers and it will be employees. So mainly employees, but then you will do manager comms as well. So one of the channels that you have with internal comms is face-to-face, or over Zoom at the moment. So you'll cascade information down through the organization. So the senior leadership team will get a certain level, managers and line managers will get another level, employees will get another level of detail. But the audience that's sometimes forgotten is the family at home. So employee benefits obviously impact people aside from the employee. So particularly, I don't really write a lot for the American market, but particularly in America, if you think about private medical insurance, you get that through your employer. So it's actually really important for your whole family, and deciding on the level of cover that you want, that's something that would go beyond the family. But I think that that's true of a lot of different countries with the employee benefits. They go beyond the individual employee, and it actually does impact their family. So primary audience is employees and managers. Secondary audience is family in some circumstances.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? So it's really both managers who need to know what to communicate, and then the employees, and then the families of the employees also. There's a lot of people who are stakeholders in that. So here's a question I think that we haven't covered yet. So do you feel, Becky, that this type of communication, employee reward communication, can improve or help with to strengthen a company's brand?
Yeah, I think it can, because the way that you design your employee reward package says something about your business. So if you're a business that really, and a lot more businesses are going down this route, really focuses on employee well-being, you'll see that in the employee benefit package. You will see that there's a lot of well-being benefits that are in there, and it sends a message to the employee that we care about you, that we actually are here to support you. Things like protection, so that could be group income protection, critical illness cover, life cover, the level of pension contributions that you make for employees. Do you just do the bare legal minimum, or do you do something more? Same with your holidays, the same with all sorts of different things. So the more that you do, and how you shape your reward package says something about how much you value your employees. So yes, it helps with your internal brand for your existing employees, but it also helps with people that you want to recruit, because it sends a message. So I call it sort of putting your money where your mouth is. Whatever you spend money on is something that you care about. So why not communicate that message to your employees and to the people that you want to hire, because it tells them something about your business.
Yeah, it sounds like it would have a pretty strong impact on people's brands, especially in the sort of the remote work world, because when people are working remotely, they really maybe want to know, like, how do my benefits work now, and what can I depend on? And they may not have that same sort of social glue of going in all the time and seeing everyone. So having a company that puts the benefits really clear, and having someone like you who's a content writer who's actually translating legalese into something that people can consume and understand, I think that's the critical thing, is something that suggests, okay, yeah, this company does care about me, does care about, and that is the brand in a way, with the employees. And so, and if they say that they love working for that company, and they made it really easy from the first day, it's just as good as working for a huge brand, maybe better in some ways, they're more flexible. All of that can contribute to the brand. So here's another kind of different question, which is, how do you gather your information or do your research to create this type of content? And do you interview people for your content?
Yeah, so it's a mixed bag, this. So it kind of depends what I'm doing. Sometimes it will just be a straight interview, but quite often what I'll do is do the interview, do the briefing, and then do the interview afterwards to get the specific information I need. But I could also I spend quite a lot of time reading policies, handbooks, everywhere that the information is written down, the technical information that needs to be communicated, so that I can read the however many different policies, it might be 20 in case of a project I'm doing at the moment. So I'll read all of the policies, I understand what the benefits are, how they work, what's the eligibility criteria, and I pull all of that information together. So sometimes I read these documents and they're not very clear, and I have to then go in for just a bit of clarification with the interview. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. Yeah.
That's helpful. I mean, in a way, what you're doing is you're saying to them, give me the documents, the raw documents and the raw policies. And then you have to go through and essentially create your notes. And then you have to extract out of that a narrative and how you're going to communicate that. And essentially restructure it so that it's something that's really something helpful versus just a bunch of, let's say, very bland kinds of text, so that's pretty interesting. So I think we have time for just a couple more questions. So one of the questions I think that we could sort of start to wrap up with is this question here, which is from your point of view, Becky, where do you see this type of content marketing going in the next 2 to 3 years? What's your sense? Is it exploding, or is it kind of stable, or is there a growing need, or what's your sense for it?
So what's definitely happened over the last few years is that there's been much more of a focus on employee reward communication. So more businesses know they need to do it, they want to do it, and they're starting to put budgets in place for it. Some of the budgets are very small, some of them are bigger, depends who the client is. So I think this is really a bit of a burgeoning trend. So yeah, all of the big HR consultancies that do their annual employee benefit or reward research documents and the research that they publish, over the last few years, it's definitely shown a real change in appetite for more communication. So I think this is really going to grow. Where will it go in the next 2 to 3 years? I'm not daft enough to make that prediction, but I do think it's sort of going up, not down.
Well, we see a lot of change happening with the remote work and with the shifting of where people work. So I think that there'll be more people who are maybe working remotely, and therefore they'll need this kind of information, in hand, so that they can make better decisions about. Since they're working remotely, they may have more choices, which company they choose to work for. So if you're geographically only able to work in your city center, then maybe the companies don't have to work that hard to compete, to attract and retain. But if you're working remotely and you could work for any company, then your type of content becomes a strategic asset. So I think that's really that's it. That speaks a little bit to the trend, where the trend could be going.
Yeah.
So I think just to sort of wrap up, the Q&A really quickly. What I think is amazing about your journey is that you're, number one, utilizing what you used to do, as a actual HR staff who was working with spreadsheets and documents and all of that. And then you love writing, and you actually moved into becoming a generalist writer. And then you decided to try specializing, and it has worked out really, really well. And you essentially have been now building up best practices so that every client you take, you have more to offer. So as you keep getting more clients, you're actually getting stronger and stronger at this specialty. So I'll just kind of let you say your final thoughts about what I just said, and then we'll kind of wrap up the Q&A.
Yeah, I can quite often have an opinion on everything, just that kind of person. But what I really like to do is have options for a client. So to say, there are a million different ways you could communicate about reward, but what's the right way for your business? So how does it align to your HR strategy? How does it align to your business strategy? How does it align with your wider communications? And what's the messaging that's going to really resonate with your employees? So it's pulling all of that together, being able to draw on lots of different examples and coming up with the best possible solution for the client. And that gets me pretty excited. I love it.
What's nice also is that you're a very thoughtful, your energy is very sort of supportive and thoughtful to your client. So you don't come off as like, I've done this 100 times, there's a right way to do it, and you're doing it wrong. You're really listening to them and really supporting them. And I think in a way, almost kind of very open-minded. And I think that helps a lot, because I think for HR departments, there are a lot of sometimes they're very overworked. And so they probably appreciate having someone who's, easy to work with and kind of supportive in that process. And I think having a deep expertise, but also being very supportive in your energy and having a good thought out process and taking the burden off of the person who's hiring you is a big help. So that's something I'm just getting as I listen to you talk about what you do. I'll
take that.
I want to say thank you, Becky, for number one, being a speaker at the Content Marketing Virtual Summit and sharing your journey with us and with the people who are attending. And also thanks for coming on today and doing such a nice Q&A for the summit. So I really appreciate your time and appreciate your insights about this journey you've been on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, that's the end of today's Q&A. Hope you guys are having a wonderful day wherever you are and that you're enjoying the summit. We'd love to know what you're learning, so stay in touch with us. And we have more speakers coming up tomorrow. So this is Jason and Becky Hewson-Haworth, and we are signing off on the live stream now and the live Q&A, and see you all tomorrow. Bye, everybody.